sure.
So, hey everyone, unofficially so far, happy Friday. We're just kind of chatting about some of these bills and stuff that we're going to be sort of covering. I just kind of went to, we're going to talk about the CZ pardon, of course, but then also we're going in on this amendment to the act. And I will talk about, have you had any chance, I don't know if you even give a crap, which shouldn't, that you shouldn't need to, but of like Mika and European regulation as far as like all the stuff that's required of that, because I am dealing with that for work currently, and
Oh, I'm sure
it's
you are.
annoying.
Yeah. I remember. I mean, not enough that it's on top of mind because thank goodness I don't. I'm not.
Hmm.
What I remember from the regulations is thank goodness I'm not subject to them.
Hmm.
Um, I think I don't think it was particularly onerous from a freedom perspective so much as like I remember seeing Lifteris complaining about the reporting requirements and some of the tax accounting stuff was ridiculous, which of course is good for his business because his business is creating you know paper trails from your activity for tax purposes, but also you know it made it kind of onerous to do business as a crypto company. So you know, I don't know enough to give an intelligent comment beyond that, though.
Yeah, it seems like it. So, maybe it's endless with stuff, and I I'm not one of those people who's going to believe that anything like the in terms of government and regulation around innovation and enterprise, I could never imagine that the Euro poors would do something smart. So let me just start there, right?
Right.
And unfortunately, I have disappointedly not been disappointed in that. The thing that I'm dealing with, it's kind of a thing right now, is the regulatory white paper idea. So basically, every single crypto asset, to my knowledge, has to have or should have a white paper on file that could be their own technical white paper, but it should be one that describes like tokenomics and other things. But it's like risk assessment type thing. It's like a risk disclosure document kind of. They call it a Mika white paper or a regulatory white paper. And so that should be publicly visible on a project's website. And then it has to then be submitted to this government portal of all these things for every crypto asset. And once they're all on file, then if you're an exchange or a regulated entity, you can decide when you decide to list assets or not. You could have a risk if you don't, if it isn't one of these approved ones. And so I've been dealing with that right now on the Dash side because we don't have one on the portal right now, and that's kind of like my big homework is to like talk to lawyers and get it there, because basically what exchanges are doing is they're going down the list, they're saying, oh, there isn't one of these for Dash, they're just delisting it. And I'm like, I call them up and
Ooh.
yell at them, and then they're like, oh, and I send them a legal opinion letter, and a lot of times they're like, oh, okay, never mind, that's fine, we'll relist. But sometimes they just don't. But it's this automated process. So like, everyone needs to have something on file. Like the issuer of the token has to be there. So believe it or not, Bitcoin needs one too. Now Bitcoin does have one because an exchange submitted on behalf of Bitcoin, even though it doesn't represent it officially, but they
Sure.
submitted one for Bitcoin so they would be able to trade it on their exchanges. Because of course, you can't have a crypto exchange without Bitcoin. It's just that's not the point of these. It's not going to work. Like the Litecoin
Right.
Foundation submitted one for them, all these kinds of things. And so it's like if you're the big asset in the room, someone will stand to make a lot of money from you, so they will just do it on your behalf. Everyone else has to, like the little guys all have to scrape together money or something to find a lawyer and do this. And so or what you could do also is, this is one of those reasons why I think AI is fantastic. And, obviously there's some concerns and other things, but like a smaller project or whatever can just have AI write it and then just look it over and like hope for the best and put it up. It's probably going to be okay. you know. And I'm not taking that chance completely, though. Of course, I do want to, do have a very good lawyer I know we have in Amsterdam, but yeah, it's just another thing that's going to keep like the little guy out of those kinds of things. And every time I talk to companies that I know, like I know one that's like a host, like a kind of like a Lido style, like shared staking company that's in Denmark that's making their Mika. And every time I talk to them, all I can hear in the way they describe, in the way they talk to me, is like pure like stress. Like they're going through hell trying to get this license. And yeah, I mean, Europoors will remain Europoors.
This feels like 2017, whenever the like ICO fury
Mm-hmm.
or furor was going on in the marketplace, and
Führer,
like
nice
the
Euro
SEC,
reference there.
yeah, the SEC like had this. I mean, at the time there was like a path to legal ICOs,
Mm-hmm.
and it was $30,000 turnkey with any of the major big law firms to get yourself a white paper, which was basically like a safe agreement, or they call it a SAFT agreement. It
Safo
had
agreement.
about like about page or two of your technical proposition, and then the rest of it was just disclosures and stuff.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean that's
yeah, and
it.
yeah,
That's literally it. And it's like if you can't figure that out, you get kind of like screwed. And so it's one of those things where it's like, as always, the nexus of there's like money, there's knowledge, and there's power, which is like connections, and they're all sort of interchangeable to at a certain level. But like you have to be, it's not merit. It's those things. You have to have those, otherwise you're going to be screwed. And like if you have a great deal of knowledge on European regulations and stuff and how to structure your company or your decentralized entity around things or those kinds of things, then you're good. Or if you are connected, someone will do things for you. Or if you're rich, you pay people to do things. But like merit is where those three things don't matter as much as where merit shines through. And unfortunately, merit does still shine through at the end of the day, because if you can leverage merit the right way, you get those three things and then can go
right.
through there. But it's a different style of merit. I want like the best company, the best tech, not to get through, not the best tech who also had a savvy CEO guy who like finagled it up to the top.
Right. Well, I mean, not to jump the gun on the call sheet of topics today, but that's why I think the Clarity Act is actually a good thing, is because it tends to create a pathway for smaller projects to get there via merit before they have to do the big regulatory lift in front of all the
Mm-hmm.
big agencies and whatnot. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's hit the intro and then go right into this stuff, because there's some meat on these bones here. Ready? Three, two, one, go.
perfect.
So, welcome officially, everyone. Happy Friday, and welcome to the Digital Cash Rundown, episode 208, I believe. I'm joined by the one and only Rizzn, also known as by his human name as Mark Hopkins. How's it going, man?
It's going pretty good. How about you?
It's going pretty well as well. It's been like one of those multiple 12 to 14 hour day week kind of things. And kind of a little bit of foreshadowing at the beginning of like stuff I've been dealing with, because trying to expand trying to expand payment options and things to different jurisdictions comes with just all these logistical things. And part of this is European regulations, and yay. So I would rather just be like, the only land that matters is America, baby, and just focus just on that. But that'd be simpler, but that's not how the world works. It's a global world, especially in crypto. So the whole world.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm right there with you. I've got I just launched a new project this week, so there's been a lot of 14-hour days for me as well.
Yep, wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, You're
We
not.
select this lifestyle for ourselves, so it is what it is.
Yes, it is self-flagellation to a certain extent. So we're going to dive into the CZ pardon, and it's all the crypto regulation stuff in the U.S., right? So we're going to dive into the CZ pardon, and then some of these updates on these bills that have just sort of come. I don't say come out recently, more come to my attention recently. So let's get the hit the Coin ATM radar show, and then we'll just get right into that. So, as everyone should know by now, this podcast is very proudly sponsored by Coin ATM Radar. When you're buying crypto with cash, an ATM is much more reliable and safer than meeting some random person in a random place and getting that poor guy in legal trouble in the past, up until this new act we're going to be talking about at least. And unlike an exchange which could freeze your account, you truly do own all the crypto you buy. With Coin ATM Radar, you can find crypto ATMs and other services where you could buy or sell cryptocurrencies for cash. On the website, search by coin, address, if the ATMs support selling as well as buying, and you can search by geo area such as country, state, and city, and you can check and compare actual current fees at different ATMs. So go to coinatmradar.com to find out more, which is coinatmradar.com or .com. And the one thing I think is interesting about the ATM thing, which is actually relevant to this discussion today, is our mutual friend, I guess, Ian Freeman. I don't know how well you knew Ian Freeman, but he's currently in prison for selling crypto peer to peer, but also through ATMs. So his business was on Coin ATM Radar, and yeah, now I don't know. I don't know how much we've talked about this case before, but I haven't gone into super detail. Knowing the kind of dude he was like he walked a lot of lines, so it doesn't seem like that's something that was applicable to your case. But if I was going to say which of the two people would be more likely to where they did a mistake, I would definitely put it on the Ian Freeman side. But again, you shouldn't you should be able to walk a line in a legal society, right? You should be able to just follow the law barely and be safe,
I've actually, I wouldn't say I've been friends with Ian for a long time, but we have swum in the same circles for a very long time. He and I were both broadcasters on the early internet on a channel called Rant Radio back in the early 2000s. And so I was very aware of the politics and like the ideology. Uh, Demagoguery kind of has a negative connotation. He does things for the sake of proving a point, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
libertarians do. And so like he definitely. I mean, and I say that I want to say with admiration,
Yeah.
not with like you got what you deserved. Although some people would say that, I wouldn't. I would say, he was doing what ought to have been legal uh,
Mm-hmm.
in a very demonstrative way to prove the point that you know the government will probably at some point clap back, and they did. Um,
Yeah.
and you know, it is what it is, and I'm glad that we're seeing some changes now that might make it
Mm-hmm.
easier for him to get out of the political persecution that he found himself under.
Absolutely. And I would kind of consider his position sort of halfway between where yours was and where Ross Ulbricht's was, where I don't think that, well, all this all water on the ridge at this point because of the pardons, not everything, but I would assume Ross knew that what he was doing was not perfectly legal during the time that he was exposing himself to legal threats. I think everyone sort of knew that. And whereas that doesn't seem to be something that you thought at all, and that seems like something that Ian Freeman probably had in the back of his mind was a possibility, but it wasn't like explicit. Like he wasn't hiding, like you could argue Ross was. So yeah, but
Yeah, I
all
mean, I
three
think that
deserve to be free is my point of view.
I thank you for that, and I agree. I think you painted the spectrum pretty well. Ross obviously knew he was pushing. I think Ross was trying to prove a point that it doesn't matter if it's legal or not. We can do it and create a thriving market. And he was right, but he was a martyr for it. I think Ian was like trying to push the Overton window on what should be acceptable, necessarily. And I think he was on the right side of the law, and the law disagreed. And
Hmm.
I was just trying to run what I thought was a legitimate business on a very edgy technology. And unfortunately, the law also disagreed with me as to its legality. You know,
Yeah. So, well, let's hit on like the CZ thing then, because I did not expect at the time. I guess it's not super surprising, but I also didn't expect Changpeng Zhao, the famous Binance founder, CEO, former CEO, to go to prison for anything. And yet he did. And we kind of discussed this, you know, a long time ago when we met in person, etc. And now he is pardoned. So let me just hit. There's this like Trump, this CoinDesk thing put on the screen where it's a little Trump clip. I'm not gonna play it because then people will be copyright. But anyway, he just said, "They said what he did is not a crime. Wasn't a crime. I give him a pardon at the request of a lot of good people." So supposedly he gave him a pardon for what. And then this next thing, of course, I'm highlighting our good friend from Massachusetts, Elizabeth Warren, who said CZ pleaded guilty to criminal money laundering charges and was sentenced to prison. But then he financed Trump's stablecoin and lobbied for a pardon. Today he got it. If Congress doesn't stop this kind of corruption, it owns it. And of course, the community note strikes, right? CZ pleading guilty to violating the Bank Secrecy Act for failing to implement an effective money laundering program. He did not plead guilty to money laundering. So I think she should be sued at this point. But so he basically went to prison for not being tight enough with who he prevented from using his service. First of all, the pardon. He went to prison and he was out of prison for a while. What materially does the pardon do now that it doesn't get him out of prison because he's actually out? Is it just like he doesn't have a felony on his record or something?
I mean, it's largely it's a it's a symbolic gesture. I too am applying for a pardon. If anybody's watching this and wonders why I'm on private mode on all my
Pardon
social
this
media,
man. Pardon you, my child.
and I'm not really talking out of school by disclosing this part of it. I won't get into details for obvious reasons, but I was the the Trump DOJ back channel signaled to me that I should apply for a pardon under this administration, despite it being too soon for me to apply for a pardon. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the process I'm going through. I will moderate my normal wild comments that I make on your show a little bit for that reason alone.
Yeah.
But I will say that the benefits of a pardon, which I can speak to personally, is that I mean I'll be able to possibly even open a bank account again, which would be it would enhance my convenience because there's certain things that's very difficult to live without. I would be able to regain access to my 401k and IRA, which I currently am locked out of.
So
Uh,
is who has those then? Is it just like on
I mean,
ice indefinitely or what?
it's custodied by Fidelity,
Mm-hmm.
and I retain ownership, but I can't administer it at all. So I can't add to it or remove from it. I have to.
Can anyone administer it?
No, it is. I mean, like I can transfer it to a different bank if I can find a bank that will take me.
Yeah, so basically you're legally barred from ever accessing that money during your lifespan. Is that kind of where we're at?
Yeah, and
Jesus Christ.
until the Federal Reserve or some governing administrative body that's setting the rules that saying I can't have a bank account says I can have a bank account. I failed the notability check
Mm-hmm.
whenever I'm asked and whenever I apply for official banking. It's a risk compliance thing that every
Mm-hmm.
bank does at the national level. I failed the notability check because the DOJ issued a press release about me and published the details of my crime. And if I get a pardon, that's pretty much the only thing that would be able to override that failure.
Yeah.
Um, that's number one. Number two is there's countries I can't go to now. Like I can't go to Canada anymore
Hmm.
uh,
Not
because of
that
my
you'd want
felony.
to, but
Yeah, I mean I wasn't like chomping at the bit, but occasionally I get asked to speak at a conference in a country that I can't go to
mm-hmm.
because of my felony. So that's a problem, and getting a pardon would solve that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wonder if the same thing applies to CZ as far as his condition, because he's not like, as far as I know, he's not a U.S. citizen, is he?
He's not a U.S. citizen, but it does like it depends on which country you're talking about. Like, because if
Mm-hmm.
they,
Because Canada still
uh,
probably doesn't want to see him now.
yeah, well, so it's also the other way that I could regain freedom to travel. I've been advised by certain lawyers that I employ is that I could just change my legal name because the background check that they do at customs is typically not that strenuous. CZ might not have a problem traveling because it's a Chinese name, and there's it's not super common, but it's not uncommon. So he can just, oh, I'm not that CZ, right? It's a different one. Uh,
Yeah, we can just start going by like Hank.
Right.
Hank
Like I could
Frow.
change my legal name to John Smith and probably be able to slide through every customs in the world, but people still call me Mark Hopkins. It's not exactly honest, but it would get you around those same problems.
I mean, you could also just change your name legally to Rizzn.
I could do that as
Just
well.
go right there, and you don't. No one calls you anything different than they do. It's
Just
just
one name, like Madonna.
you already got the handle for it, which is kind of funny. But
Yeah.
so it would be. This is first of all making a lot of cases of why the banking system is terrible and needs to disappear, but also as far as like how like CZ went to prison for failing to run these exact checks to sufficiently that you're just now pointing out is just ridiculously dumb as far as it doesn't prevent anything. Like who could not just change a name and then you get into a different country, you know?
Right.
Like it's ridiculous. But so as far as the why of this, do you think it was people behind like CZ and his influential people really wanted the benefits of a pardon like you want them, and therefore they lobbied to get it? Do you think that that's kind of how it came about, or was it more a symbolic way of saying the U.S. is open for business? We're not going to throw you in prison for trying to operate a crypto business here.
I think it works both ways, right? Well, the other major restriction that he had was something that I didn't have, and it didn't just spring into my mind until just now. Is the idea that he couldn't be in the crypto business? That was something that he would make public. Uh, he couldn't
Mm-hmm.
do. He was not going. He was distancing himself from Binance even after he was out of prison,
Mm-hmm.
and he was like, I remember he saying he was working on like a children's
Educate
educational system or something like that.
educating them about how to create a Binance account.
Probably, yeah. No, but it was like something like non-crypto related or non-Binance related. He was making a
Mm-hmm.
big deal of it for a while,
Dare I
and
say
then
non-binary, but sorry.
yeah. And so I think that might also play a part in it as well, is that he can be more open about being in crypto again, maybe do some Binance stuff. I've seen him show up on some Binance Twitter Spaces recently, so. Clearly, he's trying to slide back into that. This is even before the pardon came out, but must have been well after he knew it was coming. So yeah, I mean, but I think it also serves the administration, right? It's a big symbol to the world, like, hey, we're not the Biden Harris administration. We're not putting crypto people in prison. That was the dark ages. We're coming back to the light. I mean, that's how I see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's funny how like with Roger Vere's situation, from my understanding, his settlement with prosecutors was if he pays the 48 million, which was astronomical or not a lot of money depending on the perspective, then all charges are just dropped. So there's just no trial, no conviction. He just like, our bad, go away. Thanks for the money. Kind of like a lot of how the government operated in Mexico growing up. When we wanted to take something across the border, we couldn't. We just like do the old Roger Ver, and we could, you know. So, but in that case, they get all this money from this dude, but then also it sends the message of like he's not getting arrested by the U.S. He's not getting, that same thing. So I'm wondering how many other crypto businesses and entrepreneurs and things. The thing is like the Tornado Cash stuff and the like the samurai wallet stuff. There's all that like sanctions stuff, which, Trump and crime, especially international, be tough on other countries. I don't know if that would tickle his fancy, but maybe he's like, because these are American business people, right? I mean, or business people in the U.S., I should say, at least. It would make sense to like, I don't know, maybe I'm being too hopeful to think about the most, from the normie standpoint, criminal looking of these cases, where they're like, oh, dark net, money laundering stuff. Like, if they get pardoned, that would be finally really nice, for all of them, right?
Well, I mean, it's also, and it does, try to choose my words carefully, because I am trying to appeal to this administration for a pardon.
Yes,
But
go for it. Listen, it's just like me. Sometimes I have to be careful not to swear in front of children or pets.
right, this is one of those moments. So, like, I'm trying, like, my long term opinions on Trump. We've had
Of course.
private discussions. I'm obviously grateful to how the Trump administration has uh, loosened the noose around our neck in this industry, and in mine in particular. Like, I don't have to fear of a footfall or a shoe dropping behind me just by doing what ought to be normal legal activity. And that was not the case for the prior 4 years earlier to that, and in a lot of cases before that, before the Biden administration even came in. When Trump didn't care about crypto, I had to worry about that stuff, and I wasn't worried enough. That said, it's a little bit painful to praise them on liberty when they're kind of like messing up in areas of liberty. But I will say, uh, the return to business as usual when it comes to our industry, and not using federal agencies in a way that would be like combative, lawfare, I think is the word they use for it now. Like the IRS just letting a case go if you pay the money, that's actually business as usual for the IRS, right? As opposed to, and I won't name the exact case
But
because my
as
friend
opposed
is
to
trying
trying to
to.
just ruin your life.
Right. Well, like there was a case that I wasn't involved in, but it was one of my clients from the ICO era, one of the first ICOs, and they successfully litigated the SEC criminal and civil case. Right. The way we constructed the white paper and did our offering, we actually won against the feds in court, and because it was very expensive to litigate, they hired the best lawyers that they could find for that, which means the most expensive, and they spent their entire war chest, much like our friends at Library did for their case. They spent the entire war chest trying to fight the case until the money was all gone, and that happened with these guys. And so, but they won the case. They could have like rebuilt the business potentially, except uh, the federal government hit them with a IRS suit and said, you owe taxes that you haven't paid. And they're like, and you have to pay them now or you go to prison. And even though you did nothing wrong with the rest of the business, we're calling your tax bill due. And they couldn't pay it, and they sent them direct to prison, knowing they couldn't, as punishment for winning against the SEC and trying to set precedent. And that is the exact sort of thing that the previous administration was doing with Roger Ver. Like, it was trying to make a statement. They didn't want the money; they wanted the man. And
Yeah.
now Trump isn't really. I wouldn't say he's like loosening our bonds or anything, but he's just saying, okay, don't do that against the crypto guys.
Yeah.
Stop getting lawfare. Collect exorbitant taxes. Sure, do that. But if they pay it, let it go.
Yeah, it's much more transactional, sort of. And the thing
Yeah.
is, like, what I don't know, if is this where I start to steel man like blatant corruption? But if there's a price on, like, money is fungible, and if justice is for sale, anyone can have justice. Which, I mean, that this is like, I don't know, this peak cynicism you ever hear, but like it's optimistic cynicism at a certain extent. Because again, growing up in Mexico, where like, as far as like, it's illegal, like firearms transporting firearms is illegal. You can have one on the farm, but you can't get one there. So how do you get it? What you do is you just do it anyway, and then you don't get caught, or you pay someone off if you do get caught. And therefore, you can now protect your family for a price rather than not protect your family. Only some people can do it. And so, like, in a world where where justice and opportunity are for sale, then everyone can have justice and opportunity if you rearrange the money in certain ways. Which means if you're like a philanthropic billionaire, you can just pay off all the poor people's bribes, and then they're fine. They're doing great. Like, that is a system where it's like very controlled outside of that is not really good. So, for example, Roger Ver is one of those people that went in the opposite direction of the system. The system wanted to destroy him to discourage other people. They didn't just want to be like, you owe us a bag of money. And same thing with like an Ian Freeman type situation. Same thing with a lot of this stuff. And it's the crypto industry in particular ran afoul of the people in power, who I don't know how the Democrats ended up being the banksters of the two parties. Not that either one is ever any good, but I would assume that the big fat cat Republican kind of deal, that would be more the bankster thing. But now that Republicans are like the digital banksters, whereas the Democrats are the analog banksters. So
right.
It's just like it's kind of funny how that worked out. But yeah, I have to. And here's the thing also about saying positive things about.
If I could just yes and
Absolutely.
that, maybe how it happened was So I saw this great video essay a couple weeks ago talking about the evolution of the parties, and because in this bicameral system that we have, like, we don't really have, like, we like to pretend that we have conservative and liberal parties, but we just have parties that represent power. And if it's and occasionally there's internal coups in those parties that represent ideological shifts. And to be absolutely clear, how we ended up with the left party representing the banking industry is because they haven't had a coup within the Democrat Party as recently as the Republicans have. The Republicans had like a couple coups in a row that flushed out most of the establishment representation. Not all, but most of it, right? Like, all the Reagan Republicans are more or less gone. That was the establishment prior to the current regime that we have. And what flushed that out? Well, first you had the Tea Party, right? Which was a legitimate populist revolution at its inception. And then it kind of got co-opted by grifters. And then
like
you had...
does.
As everything does, and even the Libertarian Party goes through this at times. But like then you had, in response to that kind of like subtle clapback by the grifter class that was really just kind of like establishment pretending to be revolutionary, you had the MAGA movement, right? And that was something that fermented for years before it came and got uncorked.
Yeah, I would
And
kind of argue
that wiped out any loyalty to the establishment within the Republican Party, which includes the banking industry.
Yeah, I would basically say, I mean, not to get too political science and history on this crypto show, but it would kind of seem like the Tea Party was sort of like the right wing side of Occupy to a certain extent.
Yeah. No, that's exactly correct.
And it kind of had an impact, but then got absorbed. And then wave 2 was MAGA. Well, it was that, and then like the Ron Paul revolution was sort of like a radical wing of that continued on. A lot of that fed into then the MAGA 1.0 movement, which started the 2016 era thing, and then the episode 3 return of the MAGA or whatever in this last year was that, plus the coalition, which is then I would say the New Republican Party, which is a bunch of, it's like the Joe Rogan Democrats on board, the Elon Musk Democrats, like all those people joining it. And now it's a completely different party. Whereas the Democrats, from my understanding, kind of just resisted the Occupy movement until it died, resisted the Bernie movement until it sort of died, resisted the Andrew Yang movement until it sort of died, and now there's just like even like the AOC people, like the next level of the next wave of the new blood are just right into the machine. And there's not really oversimplifying, but yeah,
there. I wouldn't say like AOC and like the her class of Democrat is absorbed. I assume some of them definitely are. I think the ideologues are there, but they represent such a small minority of the new Democrat Party that it's still dominated by the establishment. You know.
yeah, for sure. So let's hammer into these
Yeah.
Clarity Act.
I mean, we
thing.
kind of have to talk about politics a little bit since we're talking about bills and stuff. So I guess
And
it's
like
bound
where
to
they
come up.
went, and
Yeah.
well, and I have to say just the last thing about, like me, I am an extra political person as far as I have very political points of view. I have been known to vote or take part in specific activism, but it's very targeted. I don't owe allegiance to anyone or have any direct hopes of anything good from politics, right? It's for me, it's just like it's like transactional. What can I get out of it? Which usually is
Right.
nothing good. But in that case, like when Trump does all this nonsense, it doesn't emotionally affect me because they all do
Right.
that nonsense. From the point of view, like that's the thing. I have no problem saying tons of nice things about Trump, even though he himself does not deserve that. Because what we got, what my people, my kind, my interest group got out of his, coronation, as it were. Again, if you're going to believe the protest these days, is just almost everything I wanted out of like what I care about the most, which is crypto. Like friends got out of prison. That's great. But also
Yeah.
like the industry, like all the lawsuits stopped, everything backed off. Stuff is booming. These laws, as we're going to break into, this is like this stuff doesn't look so bad. Like if we saw this, if this was like 2012, 2013, and
It
we
would kick
saw,
off the biggest bull run in history of
well, not
anything.
just that, but if you told me then, like I was considering myself like, like a Monero wet dream kind of thing. Like I'm this like Guy Fawkes wearing like semi-criminal dude. Like that's what I thought we'd have to do to have financial sovereignty. And if I just saw this like right to self-custody enshrined into law and the U.S. Senate level, I'd be like, that's bullshit. This is not going to happen. So that's my point about being like happy about the Trump administration. I don't think you have to give any big caveats about all the other garbage that's
Well, I mean,
happening. You know?
the only reason I have to give caveats is nothing to
Yes.
do with our crypto friends. I do have friends and
Mm-hmm.
family that are victimized by other policies, right?
Yeah,
And they will see this.
course.
And I have to go like, look, man, it's good for me in one sense, but it's also bad for me in another sense because, my friends are getting harassed by ICE agents despite being American citizens. That's not great.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and the cynical part of me then turns back and says like those same people like 4 or 5 years ago were had their businesses shut down for nothing and stuff like that, and it's just like
Yeah.
so
No, it's crap on both sides.
yes,
I can't give
of course,
full-throated support to the current administration when stuff like that happens.
yes. That's exactly it. I'm sort of seeing like a sea of crap and then a diamond pop up where you just do not see diamonds pop up. They don't happen. It just like imagine like the end and dismantling of the warfare state in an otherwise unremarkable administration. If that happened, I would be like, dude, best ever. And I'd be like,
Yeah.
well, what about all this extra taxation and regulation here and this and that and the police?
We'll get to it next
I
time. Let's just do
understand,
this.
but this is cool.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that being said, hitting on these laws. So I'm throw up on the screen some random dude at Regulatory Jason gives this big thread where he kind of breaks down. If anyone wants to follow that for a little bit more context on this stuff. But basically, to recap the whole thing, we did talk about the Clarity Act on a show previous. There was 2 big crypto bills in the U.S. that came through. One's the Genius Act, which defined stablecoins and how one could issue them. I think that's kind of like a 50-50. Like, I don't really care. It was not great, but not terrible. What is good, though, is that everyone's not scared of issuing stablecoins, and Now it's so much easier to get from fiat to crypto. You don't have to go through some sketchy exchange that then will have their banking relationships harassed, etc. And then you can just basically, I think it'll be with the next few years at least, almost everyone in the US will be able to just get stable coins from their bank immediately. And then you could just dex it to anything. And then, so that part is really cool. The Clarity Act, not all great, but it does a few things. It puts very clear definitions of what is a security versus a commodity, so you can't get the SEC to sue the shit out of you for nothing, and then say, please don't make any rules. We like kind of like suing whoever we want. It puts an end to that, and also it decriminalizes a lot of this crypto gray area stuff that just was implicitly either completely legal or completely illegal, and in your case in particular, completely illegal, and it kind of puts an end to that. So that passed the House, and in the Senate the Senate Banking Committee, I believe, is currently working on their own version of this basic thing, and they're going to go shop them back and forth. And so I expected this to be a much worse version. Now, you have not experienced that it's a worse version, correct? From like the part that you really care about, right?
The part that I super care about, for obvious reasons, and I'll briefly recap it for anybody that hasn't seen my previous 80 appearances on the show and talked about it, is I was arrested for, like what Ian Freeman was, for selling Bitcoin under 18 USC 1960 OTC dealing, and it was this Massey language that's part of what was being called alternatively the blockchain regulatory certainty act, or the DeFi regulatory certainty act, is now is basically tacked on as a rider or as a key piece of this Clarity Act, which closes the loophole that says FinCEN has jurisdiction over what you're doing as a money transmitter. If you do not custody customer funds in any way, either as a DeFi AMM or as an OTC seller, you are not considered a money exchanger or a money transmitter. And that's the part that I, for very personal reasons, care the most about. And thankfully, it has stayed mostly intact. Like there's been no material changes to the language between the Massey original verbiage and the Senate version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's like the real like cool part of things, right?
Yes.
Our ability to just transact peer to peer does not seem to be criminalized anymore. And the one part that like I looked at was you need KYC for escrow of $1,000 or more, or something like that, for these peer to peer trades. Which I'm just like anti KYC for anything anyway, but like it doesn't seem that unreasonable, But again, anything new that I'm like meh.
So like if anybody's reading along in their books at home, it's section 505. So the Senate bill draws a bright line. As long as you never take custody, you're not a money transmitter. So that means classic hand-to-hand, like if you're buying a truck or a cup of coffee with crypto, you're no longer considered engaging with as a money transmitter. And it's fully outside of CFTC, FinCEN, and SEC purview. So it's not just that's kind of the new change here, is it's not only is it not under FinCEN, it's also not CFTC, also not SEC. So that's just like you and I interacting, that's no longer criminal. Mm-hmm. Very rarely ever prosecuted as criminal, but was considered criminal. Ask my federal agent, he'll tell you. But also what is interestingly on top of that is that if you're selling OTC stable coins and you adhere to certain patterns of behavior, you're also not under the purview of any three of those agencies in terms of your transactions. As long as you're not custodying customer funds. It's got to be like a throw me the idol, I throw you the rope type situation. Make the exchange at the same time. If at any point in this you are custodying customer funds, either the tokens or the coins or the cash, you're getting into regulated territory. But for any like normal, hey man, I got $500, can you sell me some Bitcoin or whatever? Totally decriminalized.
Yeah, which is fantastic, and that's kind of what a lot of people were doing and just not going to prison for, except for the people who went to prison for it, and that sucks. Now, I did really like, of course, that it keeps in enshrinement into like the right of self custody and things like that, and
Yeah.
of open source tech and all that stuff, which is like, oh, that's so good. Now, the interesting part is the asset classification part, and maybe we'll be
Yes.
a little bit of a speed run on this one because, and here's my big disclaimer, by the way, just let's have to responsible people give disclaimers. My disclaimer is I looked up the differences and asked AI to compare, and I came up with this stuff, and it seems pretty solid. Then, as a proper journalist, I attempted to find primary sources to fully corroborate everything here, and I kind of did not manage to get to all of that because the LLMs kept on hallucinating wrong links and stuff. And then I got to the right one. I looked. I was like, which section of this? I started searching. I couldn't find the exact keywords, and so despite the fact that everything collaborated together seems to have it seems to strongly indicate that this is in the bill. This is true. I don't have primary source confirmation. So let me give about like a 5% chance that this is fake news. Just want to give that, right? It could be complete bullshit. So thankfully it's only 7 minutes of bullshit before this is over. So let me sit to this criteria. So there's a decentralization matrix kind of that at least this law or these proposed collection of laws, again, I'm not exactly sure, but let's just say start to put in. And anyway, as far as this is it has to do with if you're a digital commodity versus a security. And there's 4 categories of that. There's like a fully decentralized commodity. There's a asterisk commodity, which is, has some securitized sort of elements to it. Then there's an ancillary asset, which is a hybrid security commodity, which has joint SEC, CFTC overview, whereas then you have a complete investment contract security, which is purely SEC. So, for example, it's validator control. How much of that is controlled by one entity? Governance. Is there an on-chain governance method where people can decide actions and etc.? Is there any issuer or developer influence? And also, how much of the tokens did they get? Did the issuer get, like an ICO, which is an interesting thing that hits Ethereum. And so across these 4 levels, when I asked it to compare a few different, like the top 200 CoinMarketCap coins, according to this thing, it was kind of interesting where it gave this whole tier. Now, again, massive disclaimer, this is so open to interpretation, I'm sure. And I'm sure lawyers who are involved in all of these projects, depending on how they're treated, might fight for this. They might say, oh, well, I don't like that classification, etc. But as far as the level 1, the fully decentralized coins, this only lists 12, which are Bitcoin, Dogecoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, Monero, Zcash, Dash, Ravencoin, Decred, Horizon, Komodo, and Siacoin. And as far as the ones that are completely commoditized. And then the level 2s are mostly the same, or mostly similar, but like Ethereum is in there because it did have an ICO and does have a foundation that sells stuff. One difference in this, from my understanding, is these kinds of assets the founding teams or whatever, can only sell up to 100 million worth a year as a commodity. After anything more than that, so if the Ethereum Foundation wants to sell 150 million worth of ETH, they would sell 100 million, and then 50 million would be as a securities offering, which is, interesting, kind of puts a cap on that kind of stuff. And then the level 3 coins with like the BNB Solana, which if you listen to my good friend Justin Bond, Solana is one of the more decentralized structurally coins out there, but because of all the token, like, investing and all that kind of stuff, it is classified kind of as a hybrid thing. So the SEC might have partial oversight into Solana sales if this becomes law, which is quite interesting. And the rest of like TRX and stuff like that, makes a lot of sense, I guess. Also kind of funny down here is the securities, the clear securities under this, one of which would be considered XRP, which the funny thing about Ripple, also known as XRP, if you care to call it that, as far as I know, like one of my good friends was a TradFi professional investor who I kind of have known for many years, and he got interested in crypto not too long after I did, and he constantly said like Ripple's the most obvious security in the world. And then of course you have the SEC lawsuits where they kind of won some bits of it. They kind of got legal precedents to say, oh, maybe not a security or whatever. This law sounds like it would make like 100% issuer, like tokens issued to the founders kind of things. It would make them like a security basically. And so Ripple would then be, the XRP would then be the investment token for the Ripple company, as it literally is today. Listen, I'm being a little exaggerating by saying that, but not by much. That is basically what it is today. So
Yeah.
my thought, because as we're coming up on the end of this thing real quick, my thought on that is I don't like the government trying to say who can sell what or what disclosures they have to do by law in order. I don't like any of that stuff. So for me, this is a step backwards from clarity in that it's a little bit more tiered here, and more assets could have more restrictions. That's the number one thing I think about. But the number two thing is kind of the opposite point of view, which is this severely disadvantages centralized things. All the crap, like the money grubbing stuff, all the centralized company like decentralized and name only stuff suffers massively, where the righteous projects, which traditionally have not been able to raise as much money as easily, have also, have suffered more traditionally because they've had their own limitations by their righteousness, are now doing better. So we'll see. Let's hope this passes. Real quick, what do you want to shill? Anything you want to shill other than your X account, or probably not your X account right now?
Yeah. No, I was gonna yes and what you were saying there, and I know we got to run real quick, so I'll just go to shill o'clock and say Animus. I know a bunch of you guys are watching, so this is I've talked about Sanctum previously on the program. That's my agentic AI operating system. Animus is a fork of that I've been brought on to do by a project for robotics engineering. So that's the thing that I've been 14 hours a day on for the last couple of weeks. They bought me a bunch of robots. I'll send some videos. You may want to share them or just enjoy them.
Sure.
It's just cool stuff. I got a Unitree robot that I'm messing with and putting an AI brain into.
Is there a link I can throw on the screen?
Yeah, it's Animus. Animus. Actually, hang on. Animus.uno, I think, is our domain name. Yep. Animus.uno.
Okay, let me just throw that up on the screen. All right. Fantastic. Cool. Well, I got to take off now. I'm going to join the Komodo Town Hall, which they have every Friday. I got invited to. Very gracious of them. So I'm going to run off and do that. Everyone else, enjoy your weekend. Happy Friday. Don't forget the taxation is still theft. That hasn't changed. And have a good one, guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.